puppies and kittens. Welcome back to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. I'm just back from Sarnia, Ontario, Canada for BahaCon, where I have to share this embarrassing thing for Lawrence. I know Lawrence doesn't take compliments very well.
You're right, actually. It gives me painful anxiety.
and he wasn't at the conference. I wanted him to be, but he couldn't make that. But I just wanted Lawrence to know that there was a lot of love being shared his way. I was at a table with a bunch of well-known people, including Dr. Josh Cohen, Digital Hammurabi, and I mentioned how proud I was of Lawrence and the success he's making, and Josh stepped in and said, "Dude, I was on a show with him, and Lawrence is so good. He's got so much commentary. He's so competent that he would ask my opinion." I'm like, "Dude, you don't need me. I don't even need to be up here." And he told he told me that that I don't need Dr. Josh or to pull in a bunch of other experts either, because I've got Lawrence.
I really don't do that much. Thank you, Dr. Josh, if you did in fact say those things. But I got a long way to go before I'm at the level of Josh or Kip. Like
who needs that guy?
Fact,
seriously, though,
it is a point of
who
fact.
Needs that guy?
That you are well regarded as a colleague in your field.
Ooh. Well, that is nice. I still got a lot of work to do.
Kip,
I don't feel like
that. Am I correct?
No scholar would respond to that with anything other than "I have a lot of work to do." That's how we know they're right.
Yep.
Who needs that Dr. Josh guy, though? Seriously.
Well, I was gonna start a thing with his friend Jessica, so I have to get a hold of her.
In all fairness, we could have Dr. Josh here as Dr. Kent Hovind, because he does the best impression of Kent Hovind from anyone I know.
Really?
If you could get him to show up anywhere, that'd be wonderful.
He does have small children, and they're
Anyway, I thought that was the best way to start the show today.
That is amazing.
Well, Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that.
I'm gonna text him now.
Oh, we know who to go to for Josh's number.
Although I would like to thank Josh because I was doing the longer I work on this this script for the biblical cosmology video, the deeper I have to dig. And there was a source I found that I couldn't find anywhere online, and it was about it was some what was it? It was like the publication of some Assyrian text, right? So I was like, oh, you know what? I can't find this anywhere. I'm gonna ask Josh and see what happens. He sent me the entire book.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, he's obnoxiously sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they both seem just like the sweetest, kindest people in the whole wide world. Sadly, we have to get... Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, leading into the chapter, that sadly we have to get to a much less happy and healthy marriage, since David's going to get married, and he gets to buy his first wife with a bag of dicks. So that's always uplifting.
And the thing is, so Jonathan also plays a role here, right? So let's Isaac. I don't know if you want to put up the bisexual flag behind you, but I think that fits the context.
You filthy beings, you.
Wow, are you saying being bi is filthy? Wow, Tomer, cancel Tomer.
Well, actually, the first instance of the first version of David and Saul hanging out, meeting, because the magic playing, he seemed to really, really dig David, really thought he was a very handsome young man. True. And then later we see David hooking up with his son, Jonathan. So I'm thinking the jealousy and anger, maybe there's a little bit of, David is keeping it in Saul's family at any rate.
And just to be clear, so there's not like an explicit scene between them or anything, but the way that they talk about each other is what makes me kind
They
of
undress, embrace, and love each other beyond the love of women.
the lament
Yeah.
the lament is like crazy. I'm like, wow, this has a lot of like homosexual undertones. So
So
I
do
mean,
we get as much as what was the name of the man beast in Gilgamesh?
Enkidu?
Yes.
Enkidu.
Are we going to get to the level of that relationship?
it literally goes to them just loving each other a lot. Not physically, we don't get that, but like everything up to that.
There's an
And
embrace,
also,
a kiss, and nudity. So
I mean, I would be on the dissenting view and say that it is not necessarily reflecting any sexual behavior, because most of the language or most of the actions can be expressed through like either like in political instances. I mean, the use of the word for love, ahav, is used also by Saul, but also used to describe the love of Judah and Israel for David. So unless you want to believe that all of Judah and Israel were in love, wanted to have sex with David, then
yeah,
Also,
honestly, people simply
Maybe they all did.
regard their war heroes. It's straight men idolizing war heroes. I get very much to the edge of not being so straight.
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
right
and also
there at the tip.
taking of the clothes can also be explained through political reasons. Or like
I'm gonna let people make up their mind on that once we get to the lament.
yeah. So I think we should start reading.
So who is reading today?
I suppose I can read. Let's see here. I just recently learned how to read, so I suppose I can start with chapter 18.
Good job.
Wow, you're
read.
You're way ahead of me. Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe read up to 16.
Yeah,
including-
poor Dr. Kip. He's still in cuneiform.
I was called illiterate a couple weeks ago. So
Seriously.
This is the internet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it's the internet.
all right. Chapter 18. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. As they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry, for this saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can we have? What more can he have but the kingdom?" So Saul eyed David from that day on. The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house, while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall." But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence, and made him a commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in, leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in leading them. So already a lot of things.
There is a lot here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure where we were going when he was stripping off all the articles of clothing to hand to his best mate there.
Right. So I mean that's all like, remember how Jonathan is technically the heir to the throne. He's the son of Saul, right? But all, giving all this stuff to David, including, his weapons, his wardrobe, pushes that whole like subservience to David narrative that kind of started before. We have I forget what it's called, but we have like, starting with verse 6, it seems like there is some weird skip, right? Because it goes, as they were coming home when David returned from killing the Philistine. But we have already had this, contextually speaking, it makes sense, but the fact that directly after this there was a speech before, right? Or there was like a little dialogue beforehand, and then beginning with chapter 18, we have that scene where Jonathan's like, I am now subservient to you, almighty David. But then it goes back to the framing device of David and Goliath. A phrase that we will see a lot coming up is also Saul had his thousands, David his tens of thousands. That's going to pop up a whole bunch throughout the texts.
Now, is Saul's problem with David that Saul was primarily interested in Jonathan?
Well, Saul
You mean that David was primarily interested in Jonathan? I sincerely hope Saul was not interested in
I
his
also
son.
hope Saul was not interested in Jonathan.
I mean, they're all like, you make a good point that he's all like, the implied subtext here is that if Jonathan had lived, he still would have been happy to serve under his friend David as king and possibly under him in other ways. But that he was not, afflicted with the jealousy and the curses of Saul, and that he upheld this. I mean, it's honestly, it kind of reminds me of what they did with John the Baptist, where they wrote him in as being like, oh no, it's not me, it's Jesus, and it's because he was actually a historical character, although I don't think.
Yeah, one thing I want to bring up is the people who say that when you're once saved, always saved. For when we get to the Christian commentators here, I just want to point out this thing where God is with Saul, and then God is not with Saul. So
yeah, he just kind of goes to David right away, and then Saul is kind of butthurt about it. And not only that, but he gets the evil spirit, right?
Yeah.
In verse 10 there.
Yeah, that was the other one. Why is there an evil spirit from God? There's a few inconsistencies with Christianity I detect.
Yeah, so we've seen it before. We'll see it again. God sends evil spirits. He sends lying spirits into people. That is. I haven't done a deep dive into this stuff. Although that would be kind of cool. Actually, I'm going to write that down as a possible dissertation idea. But I'm sure Kip probably knows more about that, and I'm sure Tomer has a bunch of commentary on that.
I think I've already discussed it in.
Right, yeah, we have discussed it before.
Chapter?
Yeah,
it's come up several times, but I mean, if you were you could write an entire library on all the times God was an absolute cunt, especially to one of his people. There are no end of examples. It's endless. But
I want to make a meme of that. I want to take Lilith's picture and just put a little quote on it. If you could count up all the times that God was an absolute cunt, ...
You can write a whole library on it. I'm just saying. So there you go. Peter, you make memes. And yeah, I get that there's the symbology of the symbolism, pardon me, of the I'm giving you the my inheritance would be to be king next, Jonathan, but I'm recognizing that God has chosen you. But there's also a little bit of
DMCA, 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 DMCA.
Yeah, stop that.
And the one other thing I want to point out, and I'm sure people noticed this, he had just tried to kill David, and then he's like, you know what? Since you were dodging me so elegantly, here's an army, which he, already maybe it's a different army, but he presumably would have been already kind of leading an army. So the bipolarness of Saul there, in what was it, verses 10 through 16, is notable.
Yeah.
I mean, he is supposed to have an evil spirit that drives him to some form of what we would recognize as insanity. Could this just be a character assassination? Could he have been a little paranoid in an entirely justifiable sense because courts and intrigues and shit? Yeah. But the idea of a crazy person or a person with severe mental health issues being totally raging at you and wanting to kill you 1 minute, and then 15 minutes later being like, oh my God, you're my best friend. Like, I've lived that. It is awful, but it does happen.
I should note that we'll see this kind of mentality by Saul, this Saul's insanity, quote unquote, in the next chapter. It's more pronounced there, I believe.
He's very it's very hot and cold.
Yeah, you could say that. Okay, so I'll start on my commentary. First on verse 1. Jonathan became one in spirit with David. The Hebrew Bible reads, and the life, nephesh, of Jonathan was bound to the life of David. A similar expression is found in Genesis 44:30, where Judah says to Joseph, quote, since his, i.e. Jacob's, own life, nafsho, is bound up with his, i.e. Joseph's life, end quote. McCarter writes that in both cases, the expression refers to inseparable devotion. Jonathan, he writes, is so taken with David that he becomes vitally devoted to him in affection and loyalty. As noted in 1621, the use of the verb love, ahav, has taken by some to have political overtones, with Ackroyd speculating that the verb nikshar has a double meaning in light of kashar, conspire, used by Saul in 22 verses 8 and 13. On verse 4, Abravanel wrote that by giving away his robe, armor, and weapons, Jonathan transfers his right of succession to David. This interpretation is favored by scholars like Mettinger, Bar-Efrat, and Jobling, who writes that the giving of his clothes was, quote, a virtual abdication by Jonathan, the crown prince, end quote. Tsumura writes that while there are passages where transferring a garment is a transfer of authority, as we see in Numbers 20 verses 24 to 28 and 1 Kings 19 verses 19 through 21, it wasn't always the case, as other people in this chapter don't seem to recognize this transfer as an abdication. He writes that from verse 3, this seems to be a sign of the covenant between them. Klein notes Thompson's observation of the recurring motif, whereby the lesser person passes his arms on the greater, as we see in 17 verses 38 through 39 and 51, 21:10, which is 9 in the Old Testament.
They are also both warriors and commanders who do great feats, reportedly. And so there could be some... I mean, it doesn't really make sense to be narratively in this place where he's done the one great feat of killing Goliath, but he hasn't, killed his tens of thousands yet. He just killed one, admittedly very impressive guy.
On verse 6, when the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, this clause is absent from the Septuagint. McCarter writes that the Masoretic text begins with a clause that was probably introduced editorially to smooth over the interpolation of 1755 through 1805. He writes that the clause is a conflict of two readings. One, when they came, and two, when David returned from smiting the Philistine. Tsumura, however, writes, the account of David's defeat of Goliath the Philistine and its immediate consequences was terminated in verse 1754. The present verse does not simply represent a return to the events following 1754. Rather, from 1755 onward, the focus is on David's relation with those around him, and with 18:6, the narrator starts talking about the problems between David and Saul. This is due to the monodimensional nature of descriptive language.
So I'm sure you pointed out. Sorry, I blanked out. Did you note there that this entire section is missing?
Yes.
In the Septuagint?
Clause is, yeah,
Yeah,
it is
okay.
missing in the Septuagint.
Not just the clause, like the whole section, like from 1750. What is it? 1755.
Yeah. The
All the
chapter
way through
17
to
has a lot
18.
of like
Yeah.
it's missing. And 18 verses 1 to 5 they are missing in the Septuagint as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. They're
I mentioned that in
they're
the
absent.
previous.
I
chapter.
assumed you probably did.
Yeah.
So now there is a fragment from 4Q Samuel A that has been assigned to this section, but it's like I think there's good reason to think that it's possibly not. I'd love to show it, but I can't get my here. If I give it to you, Peter, can you show this this picture of this Dead Sea Scrolls fragment, and you guys will see what I'm talking about here. Can you see that, Peter, in the private chat?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Okay. So there's just one fragment from our only copy from Qumran where chapter 18, anything from this section is preserved, and it looks like this. As soon as
yeah, I'm not gonna try find it.
Oh, so this is
it's tough to
4Q51.
find. 4Q is it up? I can't see it.
I can't see it on
It
the
doesn't
screen.
look like it's up. No,
I'm
but he's
working on it.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to spring this on you. That was mean.
Yeah, he's
What a good guy I
Peter's
am.
always like, please send everything 87 hours before, because that's how long he needs.
So, and it's not actually like it's not an easy fragment to find in the inventory either. There's like
Pretty tiny.
there's several hundred fragments from this manuscript, and because it's tiny and it's listed, it's included in like if you guys look and see on Isaac's screen, like that's a plate with a bunch of fragments on it.
There you go.
They're tiny little bits.
It looks like we got.
There we go. So there, you guys can see that, right? So that's it. It's 2 lines of text. It's parts of probably 4 words in total. Not a single complete word. And this is all we have for this section.
Is there
from 1 Samuel
anything?
18.
Is there anything on the other side of it?
No. They don't. These are not leaves from a codex.
Oh, okay.
So scrolls you only write on
the scroll. Okay.
the verso side.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, the recto side. The recto side. Yeah. So that's yeah. So interesting stuff.
Okay, I'll continue on verse 7. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Although Saul interprets this couplet as a comparison between him and David, commentators note that 1,000 and 10,000 are a standard pair of words, used in parallel lines to denote a very large number, as we see in Deuteronomy 32:30, Psalms 91:7, and 144:13, and also used in Ugaritic poetry. Thus, the couplet can be read as, Saul and David killed many, many people. McCarter notes Geviltz's opinion that the victory chant may be as old as the wars of Saul. David No. Friedman, however, writes, the biblical writer may still have been right in seeing in the episode and the offending couplet an occasion for Saul's outburst. The very fact that David was accorded equal treatment with the king in the song would be sufficient to arouse the suspicions of any monarch, and especially of one insecure in his position and jealous of his prerogatives. It is the other pair in the couplet, Saul-David, which provides the clue to the king's reaction. For this is the only example of standard number parallelism among all those cited by Gevitz, in which there is a significant distinction of subjects, Saul and David. Once the king's suspicions had been triggered by this coupling of names, he might well have seen in the otherwise innocuous number parallelism of the song further evidence of a plot to displace him.
Can I say something before we move on about
Yes.
David's thousands and tens of thousands? Well, actually, no. I'll wait. Sorry.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. On verse 9, Saul kept a close eye on David. The Hebrew for kept a close eye is oyen, which is a hapax. The word is a denominative of ein, which means eye, and according to Tsumura, it is known in Ugaritic as to behold, and in post-biblical Hebrew as look carefully. Thus, Saul was eyeing, quote-unquote, David in an envious or suspicious way, according to Auld. McCarter notes that the Phoenician verb ein could mean look at with the evil eye, and post-biblical Hebrew often meant specifically the evil eye. He writes, however, that, quote, there seems to be no suggestion of the evil eye here beyond the general malevolence of Saul's gaze with its caution, suspicion, and increasing jealousy, end quote. Targum reads, Saul was lying in wait for David, explaining the eyeing as a metaphorical ambush. On verses 10 through 11, these verses are absent from the Septuagint. Several commentators take these verses as supplementary, probably modeled on 19 verses 9 through 10. McCarter writes that this duplicate, quote-unquote, seems out of place and probably belongs to some redactional correction, quote-unquote, toward the primary narrative, in which the offer of Michal follows the beginning of David's estrangement from Saul. Tsumura, however, writes, quote, Saul's spiritual and psychological disturbance might have happened more than once. The narrator intends to convey that Saul's problem came to the surface on the very next day after he became jealous. This was his first attempt to get rid of David, the man of Yahweh's choice, 13:14. From now on, his spiritual and psychological disturbance escalates, and he keeps seeing a chance to kill David. On verse 10, he was prophesying in his house, or prophesying. Bar-Efrat notes that previously Saul is prophesying with a group of prophets when the Spirit of God grips him in 10:10. Here, the evil spirit of God takes hold of him, making him prophesy in his own house. He writes that this evil spirit, quote, causes a state of ecstasy accompanied by negative and harmful behavior, end quote. Targum reads, and he became insane, a reading favored by most traditional commentators. But Abravanel wrote that Saul was pondering the evil intention that God had towards him. According to Pseudo-Philo in LAB 62:2, Saul prophesied without knowing what he had prophesied. On verse 30,
that is interesting to me because as I understand it, people will work themselves into states of religious ecstasy. Sometimes they are assisted by actual drugs, but sometimes this can just be done through ritual, ceremony, group hysteria, buildups. You see the Pentecostals doing that all the time. And your brain can actually produce things that are rather like drugs, that are rather like taking drugs in a sense. And you can, it's very odd, the extremes to which we drive our minds in religious ceremonies sometimes, and a little disturbing. And definitely does not always have good outcomes.
On verse 13, gave him command over 1,000 men. The Hebrew Bible reads, he appointed him as a chief of 1,000. Klein writes that Saul apparently hoped that David might fall in battle. He notes that this devious appointment, quote-unquote, contrasts the notice in verse 5 that Saul appointed David over the men of war in order to honor him. Tsumura, however, notes that as a commander in his own right, David's victories would become even more noticeable. Auld notes that David is said to kill tens of thousands in verse 7, and here he is commanding 1,000. He asks, quote, "In giving David even a major command, is Saul also cutting him down to size?" End quote.
So this is loosely this is tangentially related, but it's been in the forefront of my thoughts recently. But one of the things that you will see, because I wonder, I tend to read this. There's the word aleph in Hebrew, most commonly means 1,000, but in certain contexts can be translated or interpreted as a military unit of
which accounts for the differing interpretations in, what was it, Exodus, about the
Yes.
number of people that went.
numbers. Exodus numbers.
many,
Yes.
in many passages, actually.
Yeah.
So now one of the features of this interpretation, and I think this works here, right? Is that the word aleph just appears on its own. He's a, what is it? It's a sar. It does the
Sar Aleph.
a sar aleph, literally a chief of 1,000.
Yes.
Or chief of a unit, right?
Yeah.
Like a large military unit.
Yeah.
But this does not work nearly as well in particular the census passages from the book of Numbers. I've been dealing a lot with this lately. Are used as I mean the numbers are huge there. Christian apologists will point to them and say, well, in instances like these, instead of these being 30,000, 60,000 people, this is just military units, smaller groups, right? But problematically, what we do see is where this word is used and can indicate a military unit like this. I believe this is universal. It never appears with numbers, like with additional numerical features. It's just used on its own. David was a sar aleph, a chief of an aleph, a chief of 1,000. Whereas in something like the book of Numbers, where the people are being numbered, it says from the tribe of Judah, and I'm just making a number up here, there was 37,000 people. So it's you never see instances throughout the Hebrew Bible where that well, I shouldn't say never, but it certainly seems like in those places where ordinal numbers are included with the word aleph, that it always means 1,000. I'm done.
Finally, on verse 16, all Israel and Judah loved David. The word used for love is ohev. As noted previously, ahav has political connotation. McCarter notes that in an El Amana letter, specifically 138, sections 71 through 73, the love of subjects indicates loyalty to their lord, and may be used to describe factional loyalty to rival leaders. Thus, the nation gives their loyalty to David. Tsumura, however, writes that there is no sign of this in the rest of 1 Samuel. While Jonathan, Michal, and Saul's official are willing to protect David against Saul, there is no sign that the people in general are more loyal to David. He writes, however, that, quote, their affection and respect is the kind that leads to political loyalty, and so Saul's fear is not totally unjustified, end quote.
And that's actually bringing me to what I was considering, which is the potential motivation to, after obviously wanting to kill David, at least momentarily, he sets him up as a commander. There's a lot of potential ways this could go. If he's concerned about internal politicking in the court, then sending David out into the field gets him out of that. However, military glory, which especially at this time is kind of the whole basis for leadership, is something you get as a commander. However, if he set up a command, or as you know, of only 1,000 men or 1 unit, whatever, then there is always the potential to do to him what David would later do to Uriah the Hittite, is put him into an impossible situation and get him accidentally killed in glory. And we'll honor him with a very big dramatic ceremony because he was just so noble. And single tear. But you can set that up if you put him in impossible situations. But then, of course, you take the risk that if he actually wins anyway, he's going to look really good.
And kind of going off of what Tomer said about, like he referenced the Amarna letters, right? So in those letters, yeah, they often, since they were written to vassal Canaanite, I guess, I don't know if you want to call them nations, whatever you want to call them, communities there, they would often call whoever was the, Pharaoh of Egypt at the time, they would often call them, so they would call them king, but they'd also call him God or Lord. And this was common throughout the ancient Near East, where they would give them the super exalted kind of status. It was, I think for biblical texts, it would be a better parallel would be like in the Assyrian vassal treaties and stuff like that. But yeah, it did also appear in the Amarna letters.
Yeah, finish my commentary on this part.
Peter, I just wanted to point out that there's like a weird glitch.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's fun.
There's a weird glitch.
Yeah.
Can you see on the screen?
On the screen.
On Isaac's window, but just his window.
It's like there's 2 of them.
Overlaid.
Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah.
I didn't notice
it. You can't see it in the backstage, but we can see it on the main.
Yeah. God damn,
Yeah.
you suck.
I didn't notice, and then I was like wondering, why is there like I'm looking at my screen and I see like this.
It's like you're in a hall of
line.
mirrors.
There's a line over here, but then on the screen there's 2 of them, and I'm like, why is there 2?
I have no clue.
To the right, it's cutting you off on the other side too. No, the other side.
Yeah.
See?
Now, do you have your phone
it's
on?
okay.
on
There.
Oh yeah,
look
look at that. That's funky.
Whoa.
Oh
it's
wait,
tricky.
I think I can fix that.
Sorry, Tomer, did you say that was
That's
your
fine.
commentary for this
Yeah,
section?
yeah.
Okay.
You can continue.
I'll continue. Verse 17. Then
There
Saul
you go.
said to David, "Here is my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him." David said to Saul, "Who am I and who are my kinsfolk, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But at the time when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel the Meholithite
Hola!
as a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David. Saul was told, and the thing pleased him. The thing pleased him. I love that. Saul thought, let me give her to him that she may be a snare for him. And wow, his thoughts about his daughter. Damn, she may be a snare to him.
Saul was told.
And that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore, Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." Saul commanded his servants, "Speak to David in private and say, 'See, the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law.'" So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private. And David said, "Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute?" The servants of Saul told him, "This is what David said." Then Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, the king desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now, Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David rose and went along with his men and killed 100 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. But when Saul realized...
Just a side note, in the Masoretic text, it reads 200 men were killed.
Right.
Yes,
And what's the point of bringing foreskins of people you killed?
So
to prove that they were
that,
killed.
Yeah. So this is a very common thing in the ancient world. Like sometimes they'd cut off hands, heads. Yep. Like they'd cut off the stuff, and that's how they would count it. There's actually an Egyptian, and I think it's Egyptian.
I thought the symbolism of the foreskin was that they had converted.
Yeah, but not like this.
Not like this, yeah.
So
it probably referred not to like the foreskin by itself. It probably was like, a penis with a foreskin on it. If that means.
Wouldn't that be easier?
Bag of dicks.
Look, I've got uncircumcised.
Yeah, either way, there's even an Egyptian inscription where there's a guy actually counting the hands of fallen enemies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
I'd like to point out, on the basis of David's later behavior, that may have also been to make sure he didn't just kill Israelites to get a number up. If you have to actually bring the foreskins, you have to only bring the uncircumcised Philistines to the fore. So he seemed to be a man who, his loyalty was way dodgier than we were ever taught in Sunday school.
Yeah, and I guess it would have been difficult to find pork scratchings to replace them as well.
And then there was a huge hot dog barbecue.
Oh, God. Oh, no. That is not how we eat dicks.
Anyways, where was I?
28.
Was I 28? Okay, yeah, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his fame became very great. And
now this is the kid who says, but nobody knows who I am. I'm just the little boy who killed the giant.
We've been over this. This is very typical in this part of the world. Honestly, in all of Asia, it is considered good form to have over-exaggerated humility at all times. That's why, certain cultures, China, for example, if you're a kid, you're taught, don't accept a compliment. Be like, no, you're wrong. I'm terrible at that thing, even if it's not true, because you have to, that's manners in that time and place. Also, a little bit of politics, because Saul is already clearly pretty touchy, and you don't want to be making him feel more insecure right about now, because he's getting stabby. And the idea of, but this is very tropey. This is very hero tropey. He's sent out to get 100 Philistine foreskins. He brings home 200. He's sent out into various situations where he really should have died because he was definitely at a disadvantage, but he overcomes it anyway and is the best warrior ever. And everyone loves him, and everything that's done to try and undermine him, it just works out for the best because God is with him and he's just the best thing ever.
And somehow the dude throws a spear at him twice, and we there's no repercussions from that.
Well, he's the king. It's not like you could, hold the king accountable. Are you
upset with me, bro?
You mad, bro? Well, and they blamed it on the evil spirit that, had been periodically tormenting him because reasons.
Yeah, okay. It must have been nice to get away with attempted murder by saying, well, God sent an evil spirit into me. Oh, well, if that's the case, then never mind.
It just means that the devil made me do it was an accepted defense if you were king.
Uh-huh.
He was originally hired, well, not really hired, to soothe him to sleep. So he knew that he was unstable. So you could argue that it was part of the risks of the job, but which I guess yeah, you didn't have a choice then.
Yeah, I got a couple comments to jump to. So Eric Wander says, how many Philistine foreskins did David buy his first wife with? 2 Samuel 3:14 says 100, but this chapter says 200. Guess it depends on the version you read, right? Yeah, just went over that.
It does.
And then Eric,
do you have
adds,
comments?
What?
Sorry, I was just going to ask Tomer if he's got comments about the textual variant there.
Oh, sorry, guys. I'm having some computer issues.
Okay, I'll wait.
Give me a second.
Okay. And then Eric Wander adds that also, when did Saul become David's enemy? After the dancing girls song, or after David bought Saul's daughter with 200 Philistine foreskins? Well, I think in the second question, it seems to be a cumulative thing. It's just one thing after another. He is pain in my assholes.
Yeah. Oh, this pesky David.
He steals your, exactly. Mwahaha. He steals your son's loyalty. He bangs your daughter, buys her with dicks. Although, admittedly, Saul set the price on that one to be paid in dicks. So that's really his fault. And everybody likes him more.
In Gen Z, in Gen Z language, Saul was the Sigma, David was the Alpha.
Oh, God.
Or is it the opposite? I don't know.
It doesn't matter. That stuff is all debunked horse shit anyway.
Yes.
And the only guys who use it are creeps. Ladies, if any guy says anything about alpha, anything, just steal his phone, delete your number, run away.
Unless he's into like, you know, the Jujinshi or whatever they're called, the whole anime side of it.
Steal his phone, delete your.
That's more Mega than Sigma.
Yeah, no, you don't want him to be able to track you.
That's what it's called.
The only reason to steal the phone is to make sure all traces of you are gone before you run away, because cover your bases. But honestly, I'll wait till Tomer gets there in the commentary. But I have a lot to say about Micah, because Michal, whatever. She is so. Her life story is a tragedy, and David just does her wrong at every fucking opportunity, and it's awful, and it's just awful, and it's one of the absolute blueprints for blaming women for all of the toxic and horrific behavior that they endure, and it's disgusting.
Lilith, I don't know if you saw the message in chat, but check your email.
Okay. Was it the one about how I made the comment about writing books about God being a cunt, and John said, the book already exists. It's called the Bible. That was very funny, John. I laughed.
Okay, I'll start on verse 18. Who am I and what is my family or my clan in Israel? Klein comments, David replied to Saul's offer with a show of humility, which may also connote acceptance of the authority of the divine will, according to Ackroyd. Such self-abasement in response to appointment to a challenging office or to a divine oracle is frequently mentioned. Compare Judges 6:15, 1 Samuel 9:21, and 2 Samuel 7:18. McCarter interprets the words of David as a rejection of Saul's offer. The relatively rare word kinfolk, chayai, compare perhaps Psalms 42:9, which is 8 in the Old Testament, God of my kinfolk, is pointed in the Masoretic text as if it were the more common noun life. My father's family, in verse 18, is apparently an ancient attempt to explain kinfolk. On verse 21, now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law. Hebrew Bible reads, B'shtayim titchaten bi hayom, literally, in two you shall be my son-in-law today. The meaning of this phrase is unclear. Targum and Peshitta read, with one of the two you shall be my son-in-law today, i.e., one of the two daughters of Saul shall be David's wife. This meaning is accepted by most traditional commentators. Tsumura, following Talmon, renders, Saul said to David for the second time, you shall become my son-in-law. Halot proposed amending Bishtaim to Bishnataim, in 2 years, and so read, you shall be my son-in-law in 2 years from now. The phrase is absent from the Septuagint. McCarter writes that the phrase is a reductional expansion added to facilitate the interpolation of verses 17 through 19. On verse 25, 100 Philistine foreskins, Klein comments, this bride price of foreskins, which strikes the modern reader as altogether gross, reflects the same kind of reflects the same kind of ethnic humor stirred by long antagonism that we find in the Samson stories. In informing David of his price, the king expressed the seemingly pious wish that he would thereby be avenged on his Philistine enemies. End quote. Tsumura notes that in the ancient Near East, heads or hands were cut off from the slain victims in order to prove that the enemies were slain. He quotes from C.H. Gordon, quote, the circumcised Egyptians counted their slain foes by heads or hands, except in the case of the uncircumcised Libyans, whose phalli were often amputated for counting. Yeah.
Because remember, it's bad luck to count people, but not to count dicks.
Yeah. On verse 27, 200 Philistines. The Septuagint and the Lusanic recension attest to 100 Philistines. McCarter takes the Septuagint reading to be original, noting that according to 2 Samuel 3:14, David gave 100 foreskins. Klein writes that the Masoretic text, quote, seems to exaggerate the deed of David, end quote, since David fulfills the condition beyond and sooner than necessary. Tsumura, however, writes that this overfulfillment is keeping with the whole story of David. He writes that the point of 2 Samuel 3:14, quote, may be that he fulfilled Saul's conditions, and so Michal was legally married to him, and the fact that he had paid more was beside the point, end quote.
So, on the discrepancy there, I would tend to, one of the reasons I would tend to take the 200 as likely original is because one of the things that's happening at the time that the Septuagint translators are rendering this text into Greek is consolidation and harmonization of a bunch of these stories and traditions. So one of the things that you do see in certain texts from the Septuagint, as well as other Hebrew texts that appear in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is a tendency towards harmonizing discrepancies that exist within the text. So it would make some sense for a Septuagint translator to look at this and go, doesn't look right, I'm just gonna rub it out and fix it because of what else is going on more broadly in the text.
Also, from the other biblical literature that we've read through so far, biblical authors like to exaggerate a lot. So the higher number is probably the original.
Plus, it's the David superhero badass trope. It very much feeds into that, and they're clearly playing that card here.
The more dicks, the better.
Yeah, obviously. But David does love his dicks. But, I have to wonder how many of the errors and inconsistencies in the Bible are from people trying to fix it while it was being written and canonized and rewritten. And
quite a few.
A few. It's a lot. It's a lot.
And finally, on verse 28, his daughter Michal loved David. The Septuagint reads, all of Israel loved him. McCarter proposed that verses 28 to 29a were once part of 19 verses 1 through 7. Verse 28, he writes, was interpreted strictly as a conclusion to the account of David's marriage to Michal. Auld notes that almost all the consonants of all Israel, Kol Yisrael, reappear in Michal, daughter of Saul, Michal bat Shaul. The Lusanic recension combines both readings. That's it, unless I have Christians. Yeah, I have Christians.
I have Christians.
Yeah.
Well, I actually got diagnosed with Christians the other day.
I've heard you can spray for that, Tomer.
Yeah.
And if not, there's penicillin.
Yeah. Just take 2 and call me in the morning.
Okay, so first, Gregory Thaumaturgus Thaumaturgus, what a name, writes that Jonathan's soul was knit to David's. That Jonathan's soul was knit to David's teaches that the soul is free and naturally tends to exist wherever the mind and imagination are.
The important part is the imagination. Yes, the soul exists wherever there is imagination.
Yeah. Bede writes that Jonathan's covenant with David prefigures the covenant of love and peace between Christ and the church.
Sure, Jan.
Because Jesus has got to be in there somewhere.
Of course, David is Jesus. He's horrible to women, abusive, kills a lot of people, and everyone paints him with really loving and sweet and slightly creepy shepherd analogies.
Tertullian writes that while faithful humans are prone to fall, as Saul demonstrates, the Son of God resisted all sin. And Cassiodorus wrote that since all creatures are subject to God's discretion, both the transgressors and the just may be tested by the devil. And finally, Bede writes that Saul's 2 daughters typify 2 portions of the Jewish people. Those who would follow Christ the Lord and the religious leaders who feigned respect in order to trap him with their questions. Yeah, that's
all right. Are we ready to move on to 19?
Yes.
All right. Saul told his son, where my microphone is all the way over here. Okay. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. But Jonathan had taken a great liking to David, as we described before, and warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I will speak to him about you and tell you what I find out." Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to the servant David. He has not wronged you, and what has he done, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it. You were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason?" Saul listened to Jonathan and took his oath. "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and told him of the whole conversation. I wonder how he called him. They didn't have a lot of cell service back then. Anyway, he brought him to Saul.
That's how you do it.
I'm sorry. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Once more, war broke out, because by then it was Thursday. And David went out and fought the Philistines. He struck them with such force that they fled before him. But an evil spirit from the Lord came on Saul, and he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, while David was playing the lyre. Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear, but David eluded him as Saul drove the spear into the wall. That seems to happen a lot with his family. That night, David made good his escape. Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through a window, and he fled out and escaped. Then Michal, or Michael, or whatever her name is, took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at the head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal says, "He is ill." When Saul sent the men back to see David and told him, then Saul sent the men back and told them to tell him, bring him up to me in his bed. You're going to carry the bed down to the cave so that I may kill him. But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and the head with some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" Michal told him, "He said to me, 'Let me get away. Why should I kill you?'" When David has fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. Then he and Samuel went to Naioth and stayed there. Word came to Saul, "David is at Naioth at Ramah." So he sent men to capture him. But when they saw a group of prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing there as their leader, the Spirit of God came on Saul's men, and they also prophesied. Saul was told about it, and he sent more men, and they prophesied too. So he sent even more men, and they prophesied too. And he realized, I'm seeing a pattern here.
Wait, I didn't realize there were Mormons back then.
Yeah.
Finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern at Siku, and he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" "Over in Naioth at Ramah," they said, which is weird because he should have already known that. So Saul went to Naioth at Ramah, but the Spirit of God came even on him, and he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off his garments, and he too prophesied in Samuel's presence. He laid naked all that day and night. This is why the people say, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" So you send a bunch of, just noticing, you send some people to this place and they all become zombies. And so you send some more people and they all become zombies. And you send some more people and they can become zombies. So you go yourself and you become a zombie.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Samuel had the good shit.
Yeah,
I don't
apparently.
think he really knew what was going on. So like he sent some messengers, then come back. Okay, send more. Then come back. Okay, I'll go. Yeah. I'm tripping balls, man. Yeah.
They were clearly tripping balls. This was righteous, dude. Like just hell. I don't know if he had shrooms or what he had, but my God.
There's a lot going on in this chapter, like a lot. So
especially for so few verses.
Yeah, right. So there, like, one of the big things is that this does contain some shades of Samson. So yeah, I noted this before. Not only are David and Samson, very much like the kill the Philistines guys, but there is this idea of this wife leading them to destruction or something like that. Now it's not presented in the same way, right? Like Delilah was much more nefarious, but the idea here of, where was it? Right. So in
I think we lost Lawrence again.
Lawrence, you're frozen.
Thing that we had.
Oh.
You froze, no. Lawrence. Okay, Lawrence is definitely having technical difficulties.
Pulled out the cord.
There was some.
Hopefully, I'm back.
Yeah,
you're back. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Kat is pulling out this cord like a fucking prick. So okay, buddy. All right, fucking jackass.
Hang toilet paper from a ceiling fan. Press play and leave him to.
So where the hell was I? Right. So verses 8 through 10. Basically, it's the exact same story that we got in the last chapter, right? Except this time he goes somewhere else. But of course, the similarity is here. He's playing some music, and then Saul gets like super mad and tries to kill him by throwing a spear at him. Basically, the exact same idea is behind it too. He wants to like stick him to the wall or something, like he's a carnival knife thrower. Hey buddy, this guy is acting insane. So
it's
we
spirits.
It must be the spirits, yeah. Must be that evil spirit. So now it does, of course, end differently. he goes somewhere else, but he still technically does go to Jonathan, but in a totally different place now. Where was there was something else that I noticed that reminded me of Samson. There, I mean the connection
Sneaking out in
between
the middle of the night.
hairs. Maybe, yeah, the connection of the hair is pretty weak there.
Yeah.
But the thing is, yeah, there is so I do kind of see the shades of Samson, but I do want to point out that because we've talked about this before, right? We've talked about how, sorry, this cat is insane. What the fuck are you doing? Get over here.
Just pick him up and pet him.
So
Oh, he's an orange cat.
Yeah,
They're all possessed.
yeah, especially this motherfucker. So we talked about this before, how there are different narratives being intertwined here. So like we've talked about the different introductions, different stories considering both Saul and David, and I'm not sure if the author here is directly is in fact duplicating the section from before, or if their sources both contain this story, in which case it would explain why it was included twice here as a doublet. So it is to me that's super interesting.
There's something of a trope with the doublets. We've noted it all the time. It is an argument for multiple sources with slightly conflicting variations so that you have to include all of them, or you feel you have to include all of them. Michael here is, again, she's showing she loves David. She's the one that wanted to marry him, even though he was supposed to marry the eldest daughter of the king. And we saw that in the last chapter. What will be done for the man who kills Goliath the Philistine? Oh, he'll get this honor and he'll marry the daughter of the king. So he was supposed to marry the eldest daughter of the king anyway, just as a reward for killing Goliath. He did not. She was married to someone else. And then he, Michal wanted David, and Saul was like, oh, good, I can use my daughter as an excuse to send him out to do an impossible task and he'll die and it'll be fine. And, he didn't, because heroes never do. And yeah, it's, again, she's very loving. She's very supporting him. She tells her father what he needs to hear because he's clearly not very stable. But I have to say, with the bolster, I cannot be the only person who was having flashbacks to the prancing pony and the balustrades that, with the hobbits hiding in Aragorn's room and Fellowship of the Ring. I cannot be the only person who was thinking.
Yeah, you're not the only person who saw that. I saw that too.
I did want to point out.
And I was also curious as to why there was an idol.
Yeah, I mean, you're supposed to try to fake it, right?
Well, the idol is very interesting because the term for the idol, the word is teraphim.
Oh yeah,
which,
teraphim, right?
Yeah, which we've seen previously. We've seen it in Genesis 31:19 and 34:35. Sorry, 31 verses 19 and 34:35, where they're used basically. These are household idols, and so one wonders why. Like traditionals have been pondering, like, why does he have idols if it's critically viewed as bad in the Bible? And I'll get to that.
And the one last thing I want to point out, Samuel is all of a sudden back in the story, so that to me also points to taking of different sources and combining them.
Very much.
There's some comments that are related to him reappearing and how this chapter seems to not be.
It seems a bit of a Deus ex machina. He seems a bit of a Deus ex machina here. He, with his magical, spirit enhanced superpowers of God, can protect David by getting all of Saul's men high on God. Hello, pretty baby. Whenever they come to get him. So he seems like a plot device and not a particularly original one.
So, hey, if you're looking for dissertation or thesis topics, Lawrence, when I read some of these texts, one of the things that I wonder about is how much has been written on this connection being made throughout these texts between Saul and his performance of prophecy and his infection by evil spirits. Like it seems like there's an etymology going on here, because it says that people say Saul was among the prophets, and I'm wondering if these are stories that were formulated as a way to explain why. But yeah, I don't know. That's something that interests me.
Do you think he might have just had a bit of a mental break potentially and like stripped naked and acted crazy, and then people were like, "Oh, it was the spirit. He's prophesying."
Well, I don't know. I mean, my interest in the stories tend to go back to how these might connect more historically. So, and it becomes more difficult at that point trying
Yeah,
to
fair. I'm torn between how
envision
much.
actually what's.
Yeah. I'm torn between how much
so-
this is character assassination or a potentially real problem that someone could have had.
Well, there is one interpretation on the is Saul two among the prophets regarding this, which I favor, but once I get to.
Okay. So also I like how the text says that Saul's Dodal Morag was great.
His what?
His the daughter that he promised to David. It says that she was Hagodolah,
Abdullah, the great,
or
the greater.
the great one.
Older, or...
And in what context? do
Maybe
they
it just
mean
means
great?
she was really, really great.
Couldn't it just be
Yeah.
that she was old? Kind of
Yeah.
not.
She was
I'm
older,
sure.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that's what it means.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
She was huge.
She had huge tracts of land.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start on verses 2 to 3. McCarter notes that Jonathan's instructions seem to contain an, quote, irreconcilable contradiction, end quote. On the one hand, he tells David to hide while he sounds out his father, after which he'll report Saul's reaction to David. On the other hand, he says he'll speak with Saul in the field where you are, as if the plan was for David to overhear, in which case Jonathan's subsequent report in verse 7 would be unnecessary. He writes that there is an incomplete mixing of two versions of the plan. Klein proposed that the words "in the field where you are" in verse 3 were added by scribes who compared verses 1 through 7 with chapter 20. Tsumura, however, writes, quote, "Whatever the result was, Jonathan would certainly want to discuss it with David. No matter how close David was, it could not be certain that he would hear all the conversation." On verse 4, "What he has done has benefited you greatly." McCarter comments, "Terms like love, loyalty, and goodness, all of which may carry legal and political nuances in addition to their common meanings. It is goodness, tov or tova, that occurs in the present passage. The things he has done are very good. In Hebrew, ma'asav tov lecha me'od," end quote. As recent studies of biblical and extra-biblical materials have shown, goodness describes the proper treatment of one another by partners in a formal political relationship. In particular, to do good, tov asa, is to treat one's lord, vassal, or ally, as the case may be, in the right way. To seek good is to act as a friend or loyal ally. While we are not dealing here with diplomatic treaties, the same language applies mutatis mutandis to the formal relationship of king and subject. The things David has done have been good, says Jonathan. That is, he has acted consistently with the loyalty he owes his king. Compare also 24 verses 18 through 20 later, where where this nuance is even more clear.
I'm a little confused though because the nuance is missing on me. Mutatis mutandis. Does that mean no worries?
It's,
No, that's Hakuna Matata.
Okay, sorry.
yeah, it's Latin. It means
Mutatis
with the necessary
mutandis. Yeah.
with its necessary changes having been made.
Okay.
That's how he put it. That's original. on verse 5, why then would you do wrong to an innocent man? The Hebrew Bible reads, why would you sin in innocent blood? Klein writes that shedding innocent blood would lead to blood guilt, according to the law, Deuteronomy 19:10, 21:8, and 27:25, and according to the accounts of Manasseh's reign in 2 Kings 21:16 and 24:4. Later, Abigail helps David to avoid blood guilt in the case of her husband in 1 Samuel 25:26. Auld notes that shedding innocent blood was not a topic of the books of Samuel or the earlier classical prophets, but it became a topic of later prophetic tradition, as we see in Isaiah 59:7, Jeremiah 7:5 and 19:4, Joel 4:19, which is 3:19 in the Old Testament, etc., as well as in Kings and Chronicles, where it became an important element of the complaint against Manasseh. On verses 9 through 10, the event is duplicated in 18 verses 10 through 11. McCarter writes that this stands among the additions to the story of David's early days at court. Klein writes that 18 verses 10 through 11 are considered secondary for text-critical and other reasons. Garsiel, however, writes, from a literary perspective, both stories are combined well in an obvious symmetry. David succeeds in attacking the enemy, and immediately afterward, his success awakens the evil spirit that enters Saul, who then throws his spear at David. In the first occurrence, Saul throws his spear at David when he returns from attacking the Philistines, and in the second occurrence, he does so after he attacks the Philistines. The duplication is not necessarily the product of composing the book from different sources, and it might be due to a deliberate trend by the author. Moreover, story duplications are a common and prevalent phenomenon in the biblical and ancient Near Eastern prose, and are not the product of various sources, but of a different way of storytelling than it is accepted today. On verse 13, idol, in Hebrew, teraphim. The word is generally used to describe household idols, as we see in Genesis 31:19 and 34-35, which were used for divination, according to Ezekiel 21:26, which is 21 in the Old Testament, and Zechariah 10:2. Since the teraphim are viewed critically in the Bible, for example 1 Samuel 15:23 and 2 Kings 23:24, some traditional commentators took issue with an idol being in David's house. Kimchi notes that some view the teraphim as a copper tool used to tell the time, so to see the future in them according to the constellations. However, he favors Ibn Ezra's interpretation that the teraphim had a human form and were made to receive heavenly power. Abravanel wrote that women used to make statues of their husbands because they loved them so much that they wished to have their figure always in their eyes. He writes that the teraphim... Yeah. He writes that the teraphim was a statue made in the image of David because Michal loved him very much. Van Staldine Solman notes that in a marginal variant in Codex Roechelinianus, the teraphim is interpreted as a camel saddle, based on Genesis 31:34.
With the hiding the idols in the camel.
She was hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay, that's because I don't know how a camel saddle is going to, because like if you're trying to pull this trick, you have to put something vaguely human shaped in the bed. Like if you pull the covers up, it doesn't have to be a mannequin, but at the very least it should be, I don't
a handful of fluffed up pillows.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you lay them the long way and stack them a bit, you can make it work.
I don't think it's an accident that in these stories where the teraphim are featured, Rachel in Genesis 31, Michal here in 1 Samuel 18, I don't think it's an accident
19.
that these are women. 19, sorry. That these are women featured in these stories. And this also, I think, reflects the little bits that we know about popular religion at the time of the early Iron Age, early to mid Iron Age throughout the region within Israel. One of the things that the archaeologists have been digging up for decades now are thousands and thousands of figurines, basically and ritual objects shaped like figures, and they're finding them in like regular houses, people's homes. And the common interpretation of these things is that this tends to be a much more this tends to be a ritual religious domain in which women play a much more prominent role than ever depicted in the Hebrew Bible, and then the later temple religion. So it one of the things that I see when I read the text relatively broadly is an intentional polemic on the part of the Hebrew writers of the biblical texts against these widespread forms of traditional family religion. And as part of their intense interests in trying to centralize the cult in the temple, and in the process disenfranchising women from religious practice and
Which
ritual.
seems to have been a goal, not just a side piece, very much.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Was the goal. I mean, household gods is a phrase that we'd seen before. Were these gods, in the things that have been found, were there perhaps more representations of female deities, or like I know that the Asherah poles it could also be representative of a tree, but you might have a pole, a smaller pole, in a place where you don't have a full tree, like in your house, unless you're in the ring cycle. But yeah, it's because if you had some sort of like a log carved, I could definitely see using it for that purpose.
Some of the most common figurines that have been unearthed are like Asherah, and we recognize them often because they have they will often have a very pronounced rotund belly, but most frequently they're holding up their breasts, as one does. So it's yeah, it's the way it's done.
Apparently. What do I need hands for? I don't need to do anything productive.
See, they didn't have bras back then, so
we find ways. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me that that household gods, especially when men are leaving to go and fight battles or travel for merchandise or whatever, that women would have household gods and goddesses, and ideally lean a little bit more into the goddesses, because frankly, ladies need to stick by each other. That very much makes a lot of sense, and as you say, it seems to be well established with what's been left behind. It's so frustrating every time. There's always polemics against women. Women are using this to be dishonest, even when they're using it to save the life of the hero and sneak him out the back and then lie to their father to save his life. It's still got that but you had an idol, icky women who are deceptive and idol worshiping vibe.
Now on the goat's hair, in Hebrew it's kvir ha'izim, literally goat's kvir. The word kvir appears only in this chapter, and its meaning is unclear. The usual readings are skin, according to Vulgate, Peshitta, Rashi, and Kara; hair, according to Kimchen Klein; kilt, according to Tsumura and Halot; or bag, according to Targum. Septuagint and Josephus in Antiquity 6:217 read liver, reading kaved instead of kavir. Yeah, because the Hebrew Bible is a mistranslation of the Septuagint. So on verse 17,
there was someone in the comments who said something like, "Show me Hebrew manuscript that's older than the Septuagint or whatever," and I was like, "Here."
There you go.
On verse 17, he said to me, "Let me get away. Why should I kill you?" The phrase, why should I kill you, lama amitech, can also be read as, or else I shall kill you, using the interrogative in keeping with good Hebrew idiom, according to McCarter. Tsumura notes Baldwin's opinion, quote, the involvement of Saul's children in the conflict between him and David intensifies the love-hate relationship, end quote. On verse 18, Nayoth. Although the Masoretic text, the Septuagint and Vulgate, take Nayoth to be a place name, some commentators, like McCarter and Klein, reject this, since it is associated with another place name called Ramah. They compare it with the Akkadian Nawum, meaning pasturage or steppe, and render Nayoth as camps or huts. Peshitta reads Yonat, using the same letters of Nayoth. Targum reads the Talmud school, in the Aramaic Bet Ulpana, reading Nayoth as a plural of Naveh, placement or settlement, and uses, quote, the most pregnant sense of the word. The best place to hide is the Talmud school, end quote, according to von Staldine and Solman. Chazal, in Talmud Zevachim 54b, took Nayoth to be the temple. Josephus, in Antiquity 6, 221, renders Galboath. Steve Mason, in his commentary on the Antiquities, notes Abraham Shalit's opinion that this is a corruption of the Greek transcription of the name, itself reflecting a Hebrew begayot, actually read by Josephus. On verse 20, when they saw, the Hebrew Bible reads, and Saul sent messengers to seize David, and he saw a group of prophets. Kimchi writes that this refers either to the one in charge of Saul's messengers or to each and every one of them. However, all early translations read they saw, a reading preferred by modern commentators. On that same verse, a group of prophets prophesying. A similar event occurred in chapter 10, where Saul met and prophesied with a group of prophets. McCarter writes that the activity of the company is group ecstasy, quote-unquote, animated by the Spirit of God, which, quote, spreads contagiously to each newly arriving troop of Saul's emissaries in its turn, end quote. Tsumura, however, rejects this, writing that ecstasy is better avoided or used with restriction for the, quote, unusual and seemingly abnormal work of God's Spirit, end quote.
That and you only have so many glow sticks.
Yeah. On verse 22, the great cistern at Sechu. Hebrew for... is it Sechu? Oh. Wait, is that 22? Yeah, Sechu. Hebrew for the great cistern is Habo Hagadol. Although this reading is attested in the Vulgate, Targum, and the Peshitta, the Septuagint reads the well of the threshing floor, reading Bo Hagoren. This reading is favored by McCarter and Klein. Tsumura notes R.P. Gordon's opinion that the Septuagint is attractive both for the sense it offers and that it probably properly takes account of the definite article, unlike the Masoretic text. The word Sechu is taken as a place name by the Vulgate, Targum, Kimchi, Bar-Efrat, and Tsumura. Septuagint renders Sephi, which can also be read as bare height, according to McCarter, Klein, and Auld. Peshitta reads the outskirts. On verse 23, the Spirit of God came even on him, and he walked along prophesying. Some commentators seek to differentiate between Saul's prophesying in chapter 10 and the event here. Klein, for instance, writes, the point of the etiological narratives in 10 verses 10 through 12 and 19 verses 18 through 24 is quite different. In chapter 19, Saul loses his powers through ecstasy, whereas in 10:7, God's presence means he can do whatever the occasion demands. The spirit and the ecstatic behavior in chapter 10 confirm the effect of Saul's anointing. The spirit and ecstatic behavior of chapter 12 lead to Saul's lying naked and powerless on the ground, end quote. Tsumura notes that Simon B. Parker distinguishes between possession trance, quote-unquote, and prophecy, quote-unquote, in ancient Israel. And according to him, Saul's experiences both in chapter 10 and here are the former and have nothing to do with prophecy. He also notes R.R. Wilson's view that Saul's behavior in chapter 10 may have involved trance, but was, quote, controlled and not incapacitated, end quote. On the other hand, the prophetic behavior in chapter 19 is presented negatively, since the behavior took a form of controlled trance, quote unquote, and Saul lost control of himself.
And just in case anyone hasn't read Parker's work, he's a smart guy, but if you want to read anything that, like, any of his work, anything he's done, just know that it's drier than Ben Shapiro's wife. It is so dry.
That is okay.
The absolute driest work I have ever read.
That's pretty dry. I've seen sure now. Oh God. Oh,
Thank you for,
although
thank
I
you
do
for
think
the. Go on.
Yeah,
You're welcome, Tomer.
if you're familiar with the meme, there's a good reason for it, but you'll have to Google it. I do think it's interesting that we have two origin stories for the phrase, which is apparently a thing. Is Saul among the prophets? One which is pro Saul and one which is anti Saul.
Yeah, I like that interpretation actually.
You can see that it they were clearly writing in response to this trend and wanting to sort of, because they have to demonize Saul, but they can't demonize him too much because you got to keep the people who still have him as a hero on your side. So it's like it's all over the place.
Oh, and what
I
I
got a
wanted
couple
to say
comments here.
I wanted to say to Lawrence, thank you for the unpleasant picture.
Yeah. Got a couple comments. Not sure if I've read this first one already. Nitty says it was 100 and 200 foreskins. I did read that one. Okay.
You didn't.
I did not. Because David had to haggle with Saul.
Tradition.
Yeah. Eric Wander then says, when did is Saul among the prophets become a proverb? After Saul prophesied naked for a day and night, according to chapter 24, or when Saul prophesied among the prophets in 1 Samuel 10?
It already became a proverb, but then the proverb twisted from being a positive one to a negative one, basically mocking Saul.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Eric Wander adds another comment. Also, when was the last time that Samuel saw Saul? After he hacked Agag to pieces in 1 Samuel 15:35, or when Saul prophesied naked in chapter 24?
You can answer that by saying that he didn't see him. He just saw the other prophets, because it was like a group of prophets prophesying, which caused the messengers.
Yeah, but
he was
saw
people,
the last time he interacted with him. So he didn't deign to speak to Saul. He just, abracadabra spirited him, and then he acted like a lunatic. And
or it's possible these two different stories weren't written originally together, and these are technically symptoms of that.
And then Eric Wander had gifted 5 RN Raw memberships. Thank you very much for that. And then we have Hollyhock, who says, was blood guilt a type of curse?
Yes. Your brother's blood cries to me from the earth. Blood is vital force and magical, and has, if not like a full consciousness of its own, it has a power of its own. If you unjustly kill someone, their blood will cry for vengeance. This is obviously somewhat poetic, but there is also a sense in which the belief is held to some degree that the land will be cursed because of the injustice. That's why if you have a man who's murdered and you don't know who did it, and you have no evidence and no way to tell who did it, you get the nearest town, you bring a bull and sacrifice it and say, let the blood guilt be appeased. We don't know who did this. You blood for blood as a payment thing. But yeah, there was a sense in which the magic, the vital forces of the land would cry out against unjust blood being spilt, which was, obviously the blood of a fellow Jew. But especially in this case, David is now a kinsman of Saul by marrying his daughter, and also a hero who has served under him in the army. To kill your ally, your loyal servant, your son-in-law, just because you're jealous and petty is not a good look. And definitely there could potentially be consequences for the whole nation if the ground becomes cursed because of an injustice. You can end up with starvation and whatnot.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to hang out in Saul's living room because it doesn't seem to matter what good you do for the guy. He just might have one of his Tourette's moments and hurl a spear at you.
Well, just
like, have a seat
As you do.
on the pincushion.
yeah, keep spears away from Saul. He did not pass the background check for spears.
I would say it's also like a legal thing, right? There is a thing where, like, yeah, as you said, if you accidentally kill someone, you have to do this. But there's also like if you kill a relative, like this sort of the blood guilt is on the person who murdered them, and therefore legally the relative can kill them. Mm-hmm. It's also related. And then of course you still got like modern day rituals that are kind of blood magic or like blood guilt, like the Orthodox Jews still do the day before Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. They'll normally the chicken thing. So it's like, I mean, the moving it around is just like a legal raising this thing. This is the item, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the chicken that will be killed in my name, if that makes sense.
For my sins, yeah.
Well,
my blood guilt.
Yeah, and then they just slaughter it like normal, and then donate the meat. But a lot of people do like, we'll use a fish or just use money and say this money is a payment, kind of, for the blood guilt.
Yeah, the confusion of blood and money is creepy, and it carries over to modern Christianity, most disturbingly in kids' shows, where they explain how Jesus bought us with the special money of his blood. That's a great thing to tell 6-year-olds.
I'm also kind of amused at that they put their sins into the chicken, and then they eat the chicken.
Actually, don't the Yom Kippur chickens get donated so poor people can eat your sins?
Yeah. It's not like the sin is like, it's not like the chickens are now sinful or evil or anything. It's just their
death.
It's more like
will be like
their death is instead of your death, right? You're so evil, or you've sinned so much this year, you need to be killed for it. And instead, you're going to promise to do better and give money to the poor, and then the chicken dies, and that appeases, the blood.
The blood magic.
Yeah.
The blood magic. Everybody drink. Everybody drink.
There's also a related ritual, which isn't like as important. It's more of an ultra-Orthodox thing, which is on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, which is like a week before Yom Kippur. Or maybe it's the first day. I remember they do a thing where you go to a place with water with fish, and then they'll do some prayers where they're kind of giving their sins to the fish, but they don't kill the fish. It's just like I'm just throwing my crumbs into the water, and then the fish will come and eat it and get rid of it. And
which reminds me of my favorite road sign.
Clothes off their pockets, like, here, have my crumbs and sins.
Yeah, that reminds me of my favorite road sign. There was actually a road sign that says, "Do not throw fish on the roadway."
Okay, someone has way too much time on their hands, because that had to have happened.
More than once. Enough to put a sign up.
Yeah. Funny story. So when I was working at Jimmy John's years ago, one of the rules in the rule book was do not poop in the mop sink. And then later in the same rule book, it said in all caps, do not poop in the mop sink.
The mop sink?
Yeah. So like there's like this big there's like a closet, right? Like a mop closet, but there's it is also like just a giant sink. So like when like you put like the like that's where you like dump out the mop water. Like just
you've got like a concrete with a drain built into that. They have that in all food places because you have to mop and a lot.
And you don't gotta poop in there.
I both want to know and do not want to know who the hell caused that to be written down, because they need to be locked up somewhere.
It's similar to the don't poop in the urinal sign.
At least that's in the bathroom. I mean, it's still messed up, but like, What the?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not bicker and argue over who threw a spear at who.
So I have this sneaking suspicion that we're not going to get all the way through 1 Samuel 31 today.
No, we're not going to get through that.
So I'm guessing we will do 1 Samuel 20.
I still have commentary, though. Yeah.
That's not how you say that.
No, but you were like, oh, let's finish it now because you didn't wait for me.
We didn't make a t-shirt that says I still have commentary, though. Say it right.
I have it. No, but it's not right because the statement has to happen when I'm mid commentary. Like, it doesn't work like that.
In all fairness, if we're nitpicking, Tomer, have you finished your commentary or not?
No, I haven't.
See?
Okay,
so
on verse. Yeah.
So it does work that way.
It does work that way.
Okay, on verse 24, he stripped off his garments. The Hebrew Bible reads, he too, gamhu, stripped off his clothes, indicating that the prophets and the messengers before him also took off their clothes. Some commentators reject the plain reading, as well as the reading that Saul was naked, as we'll later see, since it is improper to see the king's nakedness, according to Ezra 4:14. Thus, Rashi, Kara, and Ditrani wrote that Saul took off his royal garments and wore his student's garment. Ibn Kaspi wrote that he took off his battle garments. Most modern commentators, however, read the text plainly.
On verse, was high as balls and naked? Yeah.
Yeah. On that same verse, naked, in Hebrew, arom. While the word can be rendered as naked, as we see in Job 1:21, Ecclesiastes 19:24, most early translations and modern commentators, the word can also be understood as lightly dressed, as seen in Isaiah 20 verses 2-4, 58:7, Micah 1:3, Job 22:6, etc. A reading preferred by Ibn Kaspi, Driver, and Tsumura. Targum renders he fell insane, in the Aramaic barshan. Rashi, citing Menachem ben Saruk, who heard from an Arab, very professional, writes that barshan in Arabic means insane. Kimchi attests to one Targum reading, which reads baishan, shy. Van Staldeine Solman notes Jacob Levy's explanation that barshan is a contraction of bar sha'an, which is a derivation of the verb sana in the Aramaic, to change, a verb used in 21:14 to describe David changing his behavior, with King Achish deciding that he was mad. She also notes R.P. Gordon's interpretation that the original expression was salsam, which must be translated by ignition of the head or meningitis. Thus, by this interpretation, Saul must be considered very ill, and therefore lying naked. Klein, reading Arum as naked, notes that in biblical times, nakedness was connected with shame. Auld notes that nakedness appears elsewhere in the Bible's prophetic literature, but in Isaiah 20 verses 1-3 and Micah 1:8, it seems to be more of an acted sign than an involuntary reaction. He writes, quote, "We simply have too little information about prophetism in Israel or its neighbors," end quote.
Ignition of the head.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Is this setting your hair on fire, or is this just getting coffee?
I said it was meningitis.
Yeah, medical terms from like 100 years ago are very interesting from a modern perspective. It's like, I can't remember, some of them are like very weird.
Yeah, like but it's not like 100 years ago.
Like consumption is
tuberculosis.
There was hysteria. There was like there's the, because people used to think that the moon made you insane. So like
camp fever,
it was
dysentery.
Lunacy.
Oh, hysteria.
That's lunacy.
Because you had that's lunacy. Hysteria is because you were a woman and had a uterus, and that made you crazy, not the fact that you were treated as less than human all of your life and might get a little bit irritable about that.
And to be more specific, it was because the uterus was believed to travel about the body.
Oh yes, yes, yes. So where is it today? Just free floating.
And finally, is Saul also among the prophets? The question is raised by the people in 10 verses 11 through 12, which seem to be of a more positive nature than the question raised here. Klein notes Wilson's view that the question implies a negative answer, that Saul is not a prophet, but rather insane. He writes, however, that this could imply a positive answer, which would be no less devastating, that he is numbered among the ecstatic prophets, who are despised by the person or persons responsible for the question. In contrast, Tsumura notes Parker's interpretation that Saul's experiences in both chapter 10 and 19 are positive, since, quote, to question Saul's experience of the trance would be to question his qualifications, and therefore his very legitimacy as king, end quote. However, he writes, quote, just as the meaning of a word is determined by its use in a particular context, so is the meaning of a mashal, or a proverb. Interpretation hinges on the context rather than an ambiguity of an expression.
I think it's interesting. I just want to say, like, the we have the thing, the messengers, they see the prophets, and Samuel is like overseeing them. And I wonder if, like, why is Saul the one that ends up naked? Is it because Samuel didn't look after him? Like, oh, I don't care about you anymore. Like, you didn't want to see me anymore.
In cases of religious ecstasy where it's the goal, or some sort of like liberation that might make you act out, there is usually considered some duty of care to the elder or more experienced shaman, if you will, to the people under their care. Granted, he might have just been in his underclothes lying around uselessly.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems the goal was to incapacitate him so he couldn't come kill David.
Now,
that might be an unintended consequence. So in verse 20, right, it says, I mean, Tom might have something about it, but it says that Shmuel was standing nitzav among them. And
we've seen that in
exactly
10.
what that means.
In chapter,
yeah,
we saw that in chapter 10. Like this paragraph is standing like at nitzav alehem. Like nitzav can mean like a leader or something. One who's taking a stand.
He's standing by them as their leader, or maybe. So I think I'm not sure
or
who says
them.
it.
It's clearly a group of prophets, though, and an ecstatic situation, or a group that are prophesying. But it's possible also that, and as Tomer's comment just pointed out, this could have been partially a polemic against ecstatic prophets. There are lots of Christians who find the Pentecostals running around, barking like dogs, scratching like chickens, falling over and having hysterical fits that look a lot like seizures, but it's the Holy Spirit. I swear, guys, is they find that creepy and gross and don't think it's God. So there have been polemics, just as, of course, the evangelicals are always like, you're not a true Christian because you're not, whatever specific brand of ideological breakdown I'm on, so you're going to hell. That also happens with these sort of more dramatic, ecstasy vibing, spiritual experiences, particularly if they're done too publicly or too vulgarly, or in some cases, if they're considered a requisite for salvation. Pentecostals, for example, believe that if you don't speak in tongues, then you are not truly baptized in the Holy Spirit, and thus your salvation is suspect, which is a little creepy, honestly.
Yeah.
And by tongues, I don't mean other languages. I mean the gobbledygook hysteria stuff.
Well, they make good remix videos. You've seen the one with what's that preacher that looks like a vampire?
You're gonna have to be more specific. Are we talking about Kenneth Copeland? Skinwalker, skinny, saggy.
Yeah.
With the giant head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron might know who I'm talking about. Who's that preacher who speaks in tongues on stage and has like a
Or
quite scary looking
Tilton.
face.
Tilton used to do it. all
Well,
the
yeah,
time.
Bobby Tilton, Reverend Bobby Tilton.
That's not.
I'm talking about your money. Yeah, he used to be in Dallas, but he has relocated. I think you guys are
Is
talking.
he still
about,
alive?
Yeah, and he's
Oh, wow.
still doing the same shit. He just doesn't.
Oh,
He does
God.
not look the same.
Peter Popov
Really?
still does that shit too.
Oh.
Yeah, Peter Popov is still doing that shit. But I think you guys are both talking about Kenneth Copeland.
Yes. The
Yeah.
remix of Kenneth Copeland speaking in tongues is pretty good.
Oh, he did have those viral clips during the COVID pandemic when he went to his empty sanctuary and had a bunch of deacons chanting magic spells against all socially distanced, against the evil of the COVID, and he was going to, plead the blood of Jesus over people and stuff.
I think it's him saying that uncircumcised Philistine.
Yeah,
That's the remix.
there's a song about that. Yeah. With a very homoerotic interlude too.
Yeah, that's pretty typical though.
So I have Christians as well. So Bede, oh God, Bede
You gotta get your
understands.
shots.
Bede understands the episode of Saul's threatening of David allegorically. Saul's threat prefigures the Sanhedrin's command to the apostles to not teach in Jesus' name. Jonathan represents the apostles who implored. Yeah, listen,
When did that happen?
Jonathan represents the apostles who implored Christ to hide in the hearts of believers while they preached on his behalf. And Saul's vow to that David would not be killed signifies the Jews' faithful affirmation of the enduring presence of Christ's church.
Oh, for fuck's sake! So it's allegorical. A late Bronze Age, early Iron Age petty warlord wanting to kill a competing or potentially competing other rival leader. Yeah, sure.
Allegory about Jesus. Oh my God.
And what does the Truffin represent?
It's inventive. I mean, you got to give him that.
I don't think.
What does the house idol represent?
I
don't think
wonder
it's that.
if they did as much yoga like as they did mental gymnastics for this stuff, would they actually be able to physically put their heads up their own asses? Because they seem to be able to do it in every other way. So,
no. Gregory of Nyssa writes that David's evasion of Saul's attempt at impaling him with a cross-like spear figuratively depicts the distinction between Jesus' humanity and
cross-like
deity.
spear.
Yeah.
there are no cross-like spears, especially not throwing spears.
I think cross-like spears are actually called swords.
Yes, and
Maybe.
you do not throw them. I don't care what Kenneth Branagh did in his Hamlet version. You do not throw swords. They are a close weapon, not a ranged weapon.
You know how medieval artists aren't really known for like being good at drawing cats, for example. There are also paintings, I think, that they've done like spears where they're like really weird looking, wide, almost looking like a what's it called when you're on horseback and you've got, like, a long pole.
A lance?
Hamish threw a sword at the end of Braveheart.
Lance or
Yeah, like a lance.
Again,
Like literally a lance.
melodrama.
I've seen another number of movies where they throw a sword and it's just like they're throwing a knife, but they threw a sword. It harkens back to that line: "You're not doing it right."
Yes, that is.
It goes
you're
very
right.
far when Hamish
No, you're
throws the
not.
sword. It's like
It looks badass on film. It's, however, a terrible idea in reality.
Yeah, like flaming arrows.
are those a bad idea?
Well, I mean, they don't really work, and I imagine if you try
Really?
setting a fire
I
to
didn't know this.
your arrows, you might end up doing more harm than good.
The shaft is made of wood.
It's
so
very
you've
much
got
a movie thing
Right.
to have.
Wow. Oh, cool. I
Fire.
learned something.
I've heard of if you have like there are special points you can do to put like a coal inside and that kind of thing where you can
Yeah, I think maybe as like to put thatch on fire or whatnot, but like the whole burning arrows, like, you know, and also like holding the bow like for 20 seconds before you release it, like that's not, no one does that in real life.
Now, Cassiodorus wrote that as David is shut up in his house and surrounded by Saul's men, Christ's temporary entombment is signified.
How?
Yeah. let me
Retrofitted prophecy. Retro prophecy.
Yeah, this I'll quote from him. Then Saul sent and watched his house to kill him. This too is fittingly associated with the Lord's passion, for house indicates the tomb where he rested in a 3-day death. The Jews' leader sent men to guard it, to destroy to say the fame of his name, so that by some trick it should not be claimed that he rose again, an eventuality which Christ had been heard earlier proclaiming. It was better than that his enemies should of their own accord desire to condemn this, for it allowed the whole world to acknowledge the fact more certainly. The evidence which the unwilling witness offers is beyond doubt. It cannot be called partisan when confirmed by the guilty person. Go figure.
I forgot about the part where they came to Jesus's tomb and went in, and the burial clothes were like wrapped around a mannequin with a mop on its head, and then they used for having a fake Jesus. I missed that part. Which gospel was that again?
That's actually the secret gospel of Mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
The secret gospel of Mark?
Yeah, the secret.
I don't know that one.
Me neither. That's why it's so secret.
Okay.
And finally, Gregory of Nyssa writes that the absence of David signifies the resurrection of the Lord from the empty tomb.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sure, Jan.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we are we moving on to 20 Saturday?
Fine by me.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Perfect.
At our usual bat time.
Usual bat channel.
Yeah.
And make sure you join the Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please
Do that. Yes.
I'm lonely.
Yeah, let's talk about the Septuagint being
Thank you
the
for-
original. In Discord.
Okay,
Join us
Isaac
in the
just stirring the
Discord.
pot.
Stop it. Stop. Just because we have trolls in the comments
been-
doesn't mean we have to dignify the crazy.
Just
Right.
trying
I've
to
been
track them to the
highly
Discord.
distracted by the chat today.
Yeah. I haven't even looked at it, so I
Oh.
guess I was
I think they're following you.
Hey, following me?
Like they've like it's because of
Oh.
you that they're like, oh,
Yeah.
let's talk about this sort
Yeah,
of thing.
that's probably
It's
it.
much-
Sorry, guys.
It's much less
Mhm.
gross than the last chat. The last chat had a guy making creepy videos that kept tagging me all this week.
Mm.
Ew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what? How did I miss
God.
that?
Oh, he might have also tagged you. He tagged several of us. It was just
There
clips.
was some comments
The
about you.
Christopher
in
guy,
last
when we
week.
made the joke about the stealing from Walmart because he was being
Oh,
ridiculous, obviously, for his self-esteem, and we're like, sure, you know
He
what?
made
Go
a
ahead.
very bad video about me because I talked about him during the last show.
Also, he did like creepy clips of me. I don't know. We did repeated gesture. It was gross. I just
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
someone send me a link in the Discord or tag me in that or something? Like I want to see this.
It's just clips and him bitching. It's
It's-
very
yeah.
dull.
I can send
Okay.
you a link.
Hey,
Yes, please do.
can I? I'm doing. Can I do this? I'm doing a stream
Please.
tomorrow, on my channel, also on Dr. Jennifer Bird's channel. We're talking about the story of David and Bathsheba, which is going to be really fun.
Are you taking
and
my
it-
time slot?
I don't think so, because you go on at like 2, don't you? Pacific.
Well, for you maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, we should be done by then. But
Okay.
Okay. Do be sure to include how it was rape, because that's very important.
By the way,
that's
there's
the main
something I want you
topic.
guys to address too, Lawrence and Kip, because I get almost daily.
But not
this-
Tomer.
No, it's YouTube. In this case, it's YouTube. So I get
Oh, okay.
almost daily how the science is confirmed in the Bible, that passage that says, and he stretches out the heavens, which we've only just confirmed the universe is expanding. So how did the biblical authors know that? I'm so sick to death at this fucking line. And
here, let me
It
tell
looks
you about where this
exactly
stems
like a
from.
tent, Arn.
This is a little. Here's a little preview of my video on biblical cosmology. So the in the origin stories in Mesopotamia, so Marduk, he kills Tiamat and he cuts her in half, and then in order to make the ground, he takes her bottom half and he makes it the ground, the earth, and then in order to make the sky, he uses her top half, and it says that he stretches her out. And the fact that it's stretched out like a tent, that is the word that's always used for tents and stuff. By the way, about like
And also,
setting up a tent.
They didn't
Also,
have
the sky isn't the universe.
Well, no, yeah, it's not. But then you get into like some weird cosmological stuff there. But the thing is, it stems from Mesopotamian motifs of the creation narrative.
Also, the tent fabric they used in antiquity wasn't spandex. Like it didn't stretch like the fabric of the universe.
You do
stretches.
stretch leather out to cure it. You stretch it out if you're doing leather. You stretch it, which the skin of a dragon. You stretch it out to cure it.
You unroll it and pin it, and that's it. Like you're not like stretching
and you're
stretching
done.
and stretching,
and it doesn't get bigger, right?
Right, it doesn't get bigger. You set it up that way. You stretch it out and you set it up,
and you're done. And it ta-da. So
and there is no way that anybody at the time would have ever gotten the impression that the space between the stars is increasing, that space itself is the space itself is inflated. No, that there's only one way to understand that. That's in the context of the time, and that was in a firmament situation.
In antiquity, the stars were like.
Oh, you just muted yourself.
Your mic disconnected, Kip.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, they saw the sky as being like, the stars as being like holes in the sky to see like the light of the gods from behind or whatever. And like, if you stretch out a material, the holes are going to stretch as well. So you're not going to stretch the space between them.
We can't hear you, Kip.
Ooh.
No, just say the Kip will can hear it.
All right.
Kip needs to check his settings or something. Yeah.
All right. Let's.
Hello. Yep.
Yeah.
There you are.
But now I can't hear anything.
I can hear you.
There you go.
Maybe one day he'll hear us.
What the fuck is going on?
we can't tell him that. Here, hold on.
This is how God punishes people. If people are going to give it away, they'll be silenced.
Yes.
By the way, there's a lot more to it.
Like
when it comes to the rakia, right? The firmament, it uses the root, which means like hammering out, right? So this is obviously like a solid thing. Even into the Christian period, we see commentators talking about how solid it is, especially Ambrose. So like, it was. There's a lot that goes into it.
The Talmud, which I'm not sure how old it goes back,
and especially in the Talmud, they're
like,
talking about different layers of the firmament too. They're talking about the spaces between the firmament. They're talking about how, like, when
there's a lot of Hellenization as well that's like crept in. Like they even talk about the Greeks as being like they're global, like they think of the Earth as round, like they're weird.
You can actually have a tiered heavens with either a globe or a flat Earth, but it does have to be geocentrist.
You can. There's a lot of different. There's some different models that I'm going to talk about.
You can have pancakes or Patrishka dolls, but
they literally
those
talk
are your
about
options.
Like the sun goes behind the firmament and then goes overhead during the night and then comes back up.
Right. Yeah, but we also have to remember that we're talking about things that were written down at like different times, right? So you could have. You could easily have in that time period like a change in your cosmological ideas, not just from time to time, but from place to place as well. So we are kind of being anachronistic. But like I think what really needs to be done is a more diachronic study, and I don't think I have the tools in my tool belt to do something like that. But something like that would be more necessary.
Now, is that not already included in your biblical cosmology?
Those like the thing is the things that I will be talking about, the things that I have discussed already, they will be talked about in that video.
Are you going to be
like,
able to address this line in that as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100% I'm
Okay.
going to be addressing it. Yeah, so I'm going to go into it in way more detail.
Excellent. And when should we expect that? Because I am so eager for that, I can't tell you.
Hopefully by the end of the month, if I get my shit together. Writing the script is so fucking hard. The outline is 14 pages.
Wow.
The
Okay.
source list is 2 pages. Yeah, it's a lot.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And I guess we'll close out. Anybody got anything more to say? Say it now.
Maybe if Kip is I don't know if he hears us yet.
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were saying
Okay.
something
Yes.
before. I wasn't sure.
I was talking about how the stars were like divine beings, right? The hosts of the
Yeah.
heaven. That's literally what they
Mhm.
are. You know, there's some very old, like I think in the Song of Deborah, right? Like the stars are actually summoned to fight with Yahweh, you know, in the battle. It's so.
And isn't it in Daniel that
But-
3 of them come down to do battle with a mortal?
I think so.
Yeah.
I have to look again, but yeah, it's pretty common. And this is where even like in the later New Testament text, it makes good sense of how, like in the Book of Revelation,
Yeah, where all the stars come down.
when the stars fall out of the sky and onto the ground, right? Like this is what's happening, is they're being slaughtered in the divine cosmic battle, and they're landing on the earth.
So it's more like
So-
stars in Narnia.
Not
they're
not
I don't-
blowing
I don't-
people.
So not really, because we've just
I
had 2
famously-
days. We've just had 2 days of falling stars because we're in the debris from some comet, and last night and the night before, that was combined with the Northern Light. I just wanted to mention that to mess with Arn.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I saw some really cool pictures of
Yeah,
that.
you,
I
just,
famous-
you just want me to be jealous.
Yes.
I was gonna say I famously don't know anything about the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings, because I kind of think they're all pretty boring. I'm told I'm wrong about that.
Narnia,
But,
yeah, but Lord of the Rings, no.
Lord of the
Dishonest.
Rings. Lord of the Rings.
No.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
So
Just watch
I was
the
telling
movies,
my friend this the other day. I picked up. I tried to read when I was in New Zealand for like a year, and during the semester break for school, and during the semester break I took 3 weeks and toured the country by myself, and so I was on like a bus or a train most of the time, and I grabbed like a used copy of The Two Towers from a used bookstore. And as bored as this is before there was any such thing as cell phones or internet or laptops even, so as bored as I was riding the bus or the train for hours and hours, multiple weeks on end, I still could not get through.
But
Well,
you
Two
yeah,
started
Towers.
jumping
on the
into-
second book.
Yeah.
It was the only one they had at the used bookstore. So
Okay, well,
I mean,
watch
Start on
the
the second-
movies
for
and
my
then
choice.
get back to me.
I like the movies. But the books, I just
Yeah.
and I'd made a comment maybe a month or 2 months ago about how I've started to notice this pattern. Maybe you guys have seen this, and this, it just kind of increases some of my disdain for the literature, is how much like I said, the Reformed theology bros love them some Lord of the Rings and some Chronicles of
they
Narnia.
ruin
They talk about it
everything.
all the time. I've noticed it in particular with Christian nationalists. It's really like these super gross people.
Oh, that's
All they seem to
vile.
talk about is the Lord of the Rings, and it just makes me go, So
Yeah.
Okay, that is not Tolkien's fault. I want you to look
it's
up.
no. I agree. That is not Tolkien's
look up
fault.
what he wrote to the Nazis when they were looking into his background to try and see if they could, he was pure enough to put The Hobbit into German.
Oh, is that right?
He,
really?
He wrote 2 letters, one of which was a polite fuck off, and the other of which is a just a beautiful one. Gave them both to his publisher and said, "Send what you want, but I think you know which one I want you to send."
Yeah,
and it's beautiful. It's just chef's kiss, and it spanks their racial weird ideas up and down, and just points out how they're idiotic even in their own world, and then
Yeah, I mean, he could write a lot. Like he spent like 2 pages describing a tree at one point. So like, maybe the movies are good enough. And...
The best I could say about the literature, I haven't read it, but I remember I was listening to the author describing it, and one of the problems with it, he said he was in a tavern. These people come up to him. That it often happens that people would come up to him and they would say, "Well, why don't they just ride the eagles in the first place?" And he says, "Well, let me tell you the problem with that. Shut up."
I would like to point out that the problem with that are the giant immortal warrior kings riding snake dragons with special abilities to sense the One Ring and a 1 mile wide terror radius all around them that are flying over Mordor.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you did better than the author did in explaining that.
Well, he was probably just sick of their shit.
Yeah. Probably.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. See you on Saturday.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Join the Discord.